Well, fellow U.S. allies say Russia was notified about the airstrikes, but the Pentagon says they were not told everything. While that deconfliction plan that separates the warplanes and the forces we're told was used, the Department of Defense says that we did not tell the Russians about specific targets. Here is the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Joseph Dunford.
We specifically identified these targets to mitigate the risk of Russian forces being involved, and we used our normal deconfliction channels. Those were active this week to work through the airspace issues and so forth. We did not do any coordination with the Russians on the strikes, nor did we pre-notify them.
And someone who knows all about these logistics, Lieutenant General Richard Newton. He's a former Assistant Vice Chief of Staff of the United States Air Force and a former B-1 pilot himself. General Newton, always good to see you. Welcome.
Eric, it's good to be with you again.
You know, the attacks were really precision against that research lab and some storage facilities, but there was no effort at all to take out any of Assad's command and control center or the infrastructure of his whole military. Do you think that that was a mistake, or is that prudent?
No, I think that was very prudent. Last night was a very impressive attack. Again, Americans can feel very proud of our men and women who serve in uniform, who volunteered to go into harm's way, and again, they did an exceptional job last night. It was a precision attack, as has been, loudly reported, against three chemical sites or three chemical areas. Again, I think it was very impressive, very effective, and as reported by the Pentagon this morning at the 9 o'clock briefing in Washington, D.C., it has set back Assad's chemical program for years, and I think that's important. So it was a very focused, very precise, and with minimum risk, and very effective.
So do you think the interest is the message? I mean, obviously there still is some of his infrastructure for chemical weapons there, or so says the Pentagon, that he can then reconstitute it, but still the message delivered.
I think the message was delivered, and it was delivered again by Nikki Haley this morning in the UN Security Council. It says that the United States is still locked and loaded should Assad decide to try to, again, employ chemical weapons. The hard part right now, though, is what is before us, is what's next. General Joe Votel, who is the commander of U.S. Central Command, essentially the combatant commander responsible for last night's attack, has said the hard part is in front of us, and that we need to look at other means, and we need to look at other means in terms of all U.S. elements of national security and power, diplomatic, economic, and financial, and stabilization efforts as well.
Well, could that include the imposition of a no-fly zone, or is it too late for that? Because you've got Russian warplanes and assets there. How do you tell them apart?
Yeah. I would not advise for a no-fly zone, particularly when you still have warring factions on the ground. What I would, however, is take a look at other instruments of national power, such as the Civilian Stabilization Program to help with reconstruction assistance and removal of IEDs. Let's remember, we still have 13 million Syrians who are without food and water. You've got 6 million who have been displaced by their homes. 2 million of those are children. And so, that is going to also be part of our effort, which is the main focus right now, is to defeat ISIS. And so we have to look at all instruments of national power, not just military. But we did see an impressive strike last night, an effective strike, and I think it sent a message to the Syrians, it sent a message to the Russians, the Iranians, as well as the North Koreans, and other adversaries who may want to challenge this president and this, certainly this effort. One more thing, if I may, is what's significant about this is it also brought in a coalition of the French and the British. Mm-hmm. And that's what's different than we had last year. Last year was, about half the level of effort in terms of number of Tomahawk land attack missiles and attacks and so forth to compare to this year. More complex, but very precise, very effective. And so I think as we move forward, we've got to look at not only all instruments of national power, but also coalition partners and those in the region as well.
And now, speaking of moving forward, what about Assad? What does he do now? I mean, you've got his helicopters, according to reports, they scurried over to a Russian base. We would not attack a Russian base. His warplanes are intact. Do they just stay parked in the Russian hangar that we don't attack because we don't want to, get into a war with Russia? Are they pinned down, or does he bring them out and start this all over again?
Well, we are walking, kind of a thin line here in terms of trying not to escalate into, a confrontation with the Russians. As Vice President Pence said earlier, the Russians are on the wrong side of history here on this one. But I think this sent a signal to also Putin, and Putin knows nothing but and respect power, and we demonstrated that last night. As far as Assad goes, he also will respect power, and he'll understand the consequences next time he decides to do something as atrocious as a chemical attack on innocent men, women, and children. In terms of should we attack, different target sets, that's to be determined. We'll look at our battle damage assessment. We'll look at the behavior of Assad and his military. But that's, again, there's a very broad playbook at the Pentagon that, we can call different type of scenarios and provide even more options to the president, but that's to be determined.
All right, Lieutenant General Richard Newton, who knows firsthand what it's like to be in that pilot seat of a B-1, thank you for joining us this afternoon, and also thank you for your service.
Thank you, Eric.
Of course.